Hello and welcome to the Take Charge podcast. I'm joined today by the founder and CEO of TexPower EV Technologies, Evan Eriksson. Founded in 2019, the company looks to continue the disruptive innovations led by the late Professor John Goodenough and Professor Arumugam Manthiram, who is also the chairman and co-founder of TexPower. Evan talked me through their cobalt-free cathode solution, their recently established pilot line, and their plans for the future. Evan also offers some great insight into what it's like to establish a startup just before a pandemic, some advice on whether or not to complete a PhD, as well as advice around scaling, raising investment, forming partnerships, launching a battery startup, and much, much more. As we're talking all things cathode, this is naturally a super positive conversation. So, without further ado, it's time for Evan to take charge. Thank you for joining us, Evan, on the Take Charge podcast. Really looking forward to this one today, learning about TexPower, where you're at with your journey. Obviously, launching just before the pandemic is never easy. Obviously, you can't predict those things, but yeah, welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. I'm excited to talk about it and be working with Strativ for all your HR needs, and finding employees is it's always helpful having that.
Yeah, definitely. As you grow, it sounds like you've got an exciting future with the pilot line and with a new facility in Houston. So now very good. Let's kick off with the biggest challenges. So from your perspective, what do you see as the biggest challenge in facing the battery world, contributing to a sustainable future? What's the biggest challenge?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's scale up. I think you have you've got to source tons of nickel, tons of lithium. There's also cobalt that we're going to solve that problem, but so that's issue. And then building all of this infrastructure, you got to build mines, you've got to build cathode production, anode production. This is a huge endeavor, and different states have made aspirational goals and set these goals. Okay, by 2030, 2035, we're going to be 100% electric, or whatever the metrics are. But there's a lot of growth in throughout the whole industry that has to happen, even on the charging station side, and farther down the line. And then you have also electric buses that they're planning on building. So you've got this infrastructure. You also have for solar cells. Having a ESS in your home is actually more and more relevant. So that's another type of battery that will have a huge market as well. And so all of this is happening at once. And right now the U.S. doesn't have a huge U.S. and Europe doesn't have a huge infrastructure for all this. Even the cells are behind in Asia quite a bit, but even more so the components of the battery materials. So there's for anode, cathode, and electrolyte, that also has to be made, and so it's a huge opportunity, and it's a very exciting time to be in the industry.
No, it is. It's fast paced. There's a lot of things going on. It's that kind of race to fast charge, to long cycles. There's a lot going on, as you say, on the EV charging sides, on the actual material side. So the mining, that was a market I used to work in. So there's a lot of interest in the mining houses and their mission zero goals and things like this. It's kind of a big knock on effect. So I agree. I think the source of the materials is one of the biggest issues, but hopefully I have faith in us as a race. Hopefully not misplaced. We can get there. So I'm fascinated to learn a bit more about your background before TexPower. So if you could give us an idea of your story as a battery professional so far.
Yeah, so I started off a chemist. I'd gone to graduate school, University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and I was focused on fuel cells. Sorry, I got a notification. So I was studying at the University of Illinois and for fuel cells, and I was working, kind of electrocatalysis. It's a big problem for fuel cells to low temperature fuel cells uses a lot of platinum, and it just we were up against a wall. You can't, there's if you wanted to switch over automotive, internal combustion engines to to the fuel cells, you would need more platinum that exists on the Earth. So it wasn't a real viable solution. Um, and so, but at the time, I graduated in 2012, I think, and then from there, then batteries were sort of coming on. Tesla was around, and we saw that it. And I saw, okay, well, this is actually happening, which is it's rare when you're in academia and you're working on something and then it's actually something marketable. Most of the time, you write these papers and they make little incremental changes, and nothing doesn't accomplish anything.
Yeah.
You're adding to the temple of science, sort of
Algebra.
brick. Yeah, but most of the bricks are left in the brickyard is
Yeah.
one of the phrases I've heard before. So, I saw this was really exciting, at the time that and I wanted to go abroad. So there was a very famous battery scientist, Doron Auerbach in Israel, and he worked on a lot of this solid electrolyte interphase is part of the important part of the battery functioning. So a graphite anode has to have this to work. I don't want to get too in the weeds, but so he's world renowned as a battery scientist, and so I was lucky to get an offer to join his lab in Israel, and then I worked there and on the cathode development specifically. So it's just for background for everybody, since that is what I work on now. Cathode, it's the most expensive part of the battery cost component, and it's the worst performing of the two electrodes. So it's the positive electrode, and the negative electrode is anode, and so it's extremely important. And part of the work is to reduce the amount of cobalt, and that's what we're doing. And it was a BASF funded project where we'd work with kind of high nickel, and then also there's another type of cathode, lithium and manganese rich type cathodes, and so basically working to stabilize that, and that's how I got into it, and really learned how to do battery research. And we did it's incremental improvements. You dope it, improve the cycle life. Cycle life means every charge, and then discharge, that's one cycle. And so if you go every cycle, all batteries get smaller and smaller energy each cycle. That's called capacity fading or energy fading. And so the goal is to make it last as long as possible at the highest energy possible that you can get in there. So that's what we'd work on, and we would modify BASF cathodes for that purpose. And so I worked there for 5 years. It was a great time in Israel, and my daughter was born there. My girlfriend at the time joined me, finished her PhD at Tel Aviv University, and yeah, I highly recommend going into the scientific career, because you don't get paid a lot when you're doing it, but you get a lot of stamps in your passport. And being someone from Minnesota, I hadn't really traveled outside the U.S. for until okay, of course Canada, and but until I was about in college. Then being able to go internationally, and you meet a lot of great people. So I highly recommend that if you're thinking about a career, and going into science is a good way to do that. And so but yeah, and it's a wonderful experience to be able to live and actually work in another country. So
Yeah, nice.
so I learned a lot there, and then it's time to come back to the U.S. and so I was lucky to get another offer to work as a research fellow at UT Austin, University of Texas at Austin. So UT in Texas. Since in Texas they assume everybody knows what is going on in
UT.
Texas. So Texan guys, and so yeah, we'd so then I joined Professor Arumugam Manthiram's lab. And what's nice about his lab, it's making cathode materials is extremely difficult. You have it's a very, very tedious process for industrial relevant synthesis, because you have to control the particle size. There's sort of a sweet spot. If it's too small, the surface to volume ratio is too high, and then you have, I talked about capacity fading. The capacity fading is much more sharp, and then this is a, results in the battery dying quickly. So your car would, instead of lasting 5 years or 10 years, the battery would last 2 years if it's bad, for instance. So That's one issue. But then the competing issue for the cathode powder is that the particle should be not too big, because the lithium, it actually intercalates into the the cathode, the particle. And so if it's too large, then it's too much distance to go, and so then your rate capability, your power, goes down. And so these have to be balanced. And then seeding these particles and growing these particles, it's done called in the process called co-precipitation, where you actually uh, you have a high pH, or you can use a carbonate to crash it out. It's in a metal sulfate solution that gets injected into this tank reactor, and then you seed, you precipitate, make a solid of this metal, as a hydroxide or as a carbonate. And this we it's metal sulfate or nitrate solution concentration. You've got chelating agent concentration. Chelating agent could be different types of chelating agents. You've got additives that you throw in there. You've got pH. All of these control it. Even the stir speed of the tank reactor affects this. So it's a super tedious process. And so in North America, there are only two labs that do it. One is Professor Arumugam Manthiram's, and the other was Jeff Don's. Okay, the others are trying to do it more now, obviously, since cathode's a huge issue, and more people are getting trained. But the the truth is, then, because this is very, very difficult, most people just work on existing cathode materials. So, for instance, in Israel, I was working at BSF, and they said, okay, you can do whatever you want with BASF material, but you have to work with BASF material that's already synthesized.
Mm.
So then you're stuck with your baseline composition. So people weren't playing with different compositions. It's really limiting to the industry. In Asia, there's a lot of work. The Koreans and Chinese have do tons of this, but in North America and Europe, it's very limited. So, especially
Mm.
in Europe, most people are funded by BASF for the cathode
Yeah.
research. So
Yes,
this
you're
gave
limited.
us like an edge.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess you're limited to those materials in that case.
Yeah. And then, so, Professor Manthiram is just, world renowned as a, cathode scientist, as a battery scientist. And so you can look up, this is our bona fides, is where you can look up on the 2019 Nobel Prize chemistry lecture. So he gave it for his longtime colleague, John Goodenough, that he recently passed away, but, it's an amazing, scientist, a great pedigree. And Ram was a long time, he was a postdoc for him, and then a colleague at UT. And so, you know, great group to join. I was so lucky to be there. So that's where I met Wangda Lee, our co-founder. And so, we were working on these sort of high nickel, low cobalt cathode materials. So the background of the cobalt is that the conventional wisdom is that you need cobalt in the cathode for it to cycle well and to be high energy. And so the initial cathode that invented by Professor Goodenough was or discovered, however you want to say, is lithium cobalt oxide. So LiCoO2 is the chemical formula. So subsequently by others, Jeff Don, Michael Thackeray, they've been adding in nickel and manganese, so nickel, manganese, cobalt, or nickel and aluminum, so nickel, cobalt, aluminum type cathode materials. So NCM, NCA, that's where the acronym comes from. And so we were working on, lowering the cobalt, just like this, where you increase the nickel, increase manganese, increase aluminum, and see that it works. And so we were trying, very low cobalt cathode materials, and we saw that it was working. But all the conventional wisdom is, no, you need cobalt in there for it to work. And so we were quite surprised. We thought, okay, wow. And then we tried it without cobalt at all, and it was still working. And so we thought, oh, this is a huge opportunity. And so we decided, let's spin out the company. Let's try to commercialize this. And so it's that's how it started. And so if you take the NCM, NCA, smash those together, take out the cobalt, it's nickel, manganese, aluminum was the cathode that we patented at UT. And so then, spinning out the company, there's these grants in the U.S. They're very generous for small business grants. They're called Small Business Investment Small Business Innovation Research (SBIR) um, grants, and so you can, they start off at $200,000 or so. It depends on the agency, but every agency has to have a certain percentage of their allowance from the government devoted to small businesses and helping small businesses in the U.S. And so this is the mechanism that they do it, and they're open calls for grants, and that's how we started. That's also you know our big skill set is writing grants. Uh, I got my wife's green card by myself through doing filing paperwork. So I learned how to do lots of paperwork, and that's what you need to do when you write grants. And so, you know, uh, um, this is the way to do it and start a small business with really minimal personal risk, actually, because you get. I was still working at Rom's Lab. We wrote the grant, and then got the grant. Okay, then I can quit my day job.
Hmm.
Still have a salary. We had a 3-year-old daughter at the time, and my wife and I. So you can't just quit your job right when you're
No.
at that type of your life. So it's good to have this. You get some pre-seed funding, and then it's off to the races. So we got DOE grant first, then DoD grant, sort of a contest. There's tons of money in the U.S. DoD as well. That's other types of grants. Maybe too much money they give to the Defense Department, right? But so that it's a good way to it funds a lot of research. So and funds commercialization of products, and it's actually this is part of why I think U.S. has such a vibrant startup community is because and it's been great for our economy. I think so. It's and Europe's starting to do this more so as well, but it's I think it's less paperwork in the U.S. So
Hmm.
um,
No, in terms of competing with Asia, it's essential. I think it's really important. So we've got some work to go yet in the US, but North America. But startups like yourself, it's really important. So very good, Professor Arumugam. Is he a co-founder as well? Is he the chairman? Am I right in
yep,
thinking?
yep, exactly. He's the chairman of the board, and still involved in that. And he's in Austin. We moved to Houston shortly after. I guess during COVID, we moved to Houston. Um, and so but yeah, he comes down for board meetings and helps us out with we're still patent licensing some patents from his group as they come out, and from UT, and very much involved in TexPower. So
Brilliant.
it's lucky to have we're lucky to have somebody with such credentials that we can this isn't working, what do you think we got to do,
Mm.
and,
No,
but
and of course you have Wangda as well. I think you called him the cathode Jedi or the cathode guru.
yes, both terms can work. It's very much, we joke that the co-precipitation calcination, it's controlled even by the phases of the moon. It's so sensitive, and so it's good having someone that can, it's part art, right? It's not
Yeah.
that's a good barrier to entry. So if you want to start your own cathode company, it's a painful process.
No. And
uh,
and and just getting to that. So you obviously talked about the journey and how you established the business, how you saw the opportunity. You obviously did this in 2019. When was it in 2019 you founded the business?
Yeah, we started off February 2019. Then we had a small grant, and so it was a year. Um,
A year or so before COVID,
year,
I guess.
yeah, and then so yeah, I remember. So for the grant for SBIR grants, they work with phase one is 1 year, and you get at the time was 200 grand from DOE, so it's enough to kind of do a paycheck for one person, and then some small supplies. And so we were working. We rented like a closet at UT Austin, and you know, and then also worked in Professor Manthiram's lab was also a sub recipient, so able to use his facilities as well. And then, but because it was March 13th, where someone passed away first in UT in Austin from COVID, and it was like immediately got an email from my daughter's daycare, shut down. Like said, okay, we're closing school because daycare until and doing quarantine. And then I immediately drove back home, brought my daughter. I was on the way to bring her to the daycare, and I saw it checking my phone at the stoplight, And then so I brought her back, and I immediately went to the grocery store and got all the toilet paper I could get. And no,
You're not one of those guys.
yeah, no. But I remember, yeah, the line all around the building, and then we got an email from UT then that we're gonna close down the campus for undetermined amount of time starting tomorrow at X, or maybe even that evening. So it was early in the morning, luckily, and so I called Wanda. We hadn't done our final project goal was to get these I think 300 milliamp hour cells, which are sort of you had to do a double layer cell. And so I said, we haven't done these yet. Okay, we gotta get these done then. And so we ran in and made these cells, which usually is a 2-3 day process, and we made them in 1 day. And then the next morning, snuck in, started them. You have to let them sit, and it was just a crazy whirlwind. And then then we're locked out of the lab. We got them on the cycler, so we couldn't see them. You have to charge it, and basically when you're testing these cells, you charge it, discharge it. You do that 500 times, and so it takes several months to run. So okay, they were on the cyclers, and luckily they were going, but weren't able to get the data. And then at the same time, that May, the application for the phase 2, which is then it's $1 million, was due, and so we had to get this data for that final report for the DOE to be qualified to be able to get this phase 1. So we had, luckily there was one guy that was doing. It's Brian Helligman is a great founder of a company now, but he's working in Professor Manthiram's group, and he had a grant for basically making it immediately came up with an idea how to do electrostatic spinning for these 3M masks. They use some polymer, and so he was working on this and was able to get into the lab then because they had a special allowance for COVID. So he was able to get us the data. So I said, okay, please give me some data here. And so he was able. I was like, I need this, otherwise we're not going to get the grant. And so he got it for us, and we submitted the phase 2. And I was down in my wife had gotten a job in Houston, and so we were down in Houston looking at apartments, and then so they got the news that that day when we were down there. I said, oh wow, okay, $1 million for TexPower over 2 years, and that's really when it went. Then you can hire more people, and it becomes a serious company, and it let us establish a lab we built a lab at the University of Houston. It's really nice being in Houston because the finding lab space for a chemical startup is very difficult. You need a fume hoods. I think fume hoods are key, but also DI water and things like that you need. And Houston has a great chemical industry infrastructure. In Austin, it's we joke it's more for dating apps. It's not kind of starting. It's not so, but that's kind of the joke about it. But yeah, now that they're expanding as well, and there's some great programs there. But at the time, there wasn't much, and then also Houston was much more lax on regulations. So it was COVID, but they let us go into the lab, and sort of had this. It's called the Technology Bridge at the University of Houston, where they rent space to startups, and you get all the really great facilities that you could have at any chemical laboratory, and it really helps a company go forward. And so that's where we started, and we've got a DoD project at the same time to do a prototype, and so this was sort of the first real kind of contract that we had. So and started the contracting mechanism with the DoD, and learning how to do that process, and it was with 24M. They're a really great company that does sort of a high energy cell design, call it semi-solid cells. So we make the cathode powder that goes to a cell manufacturer, and then cell manufacturer goes either to a battery pack or to an end user that just uses a cell for the smaller size. And so they would be the customer that buys it from us, the cathode powder, and that's their skill set. And so they're, yeah, really great technology where they have very thick electrodes. And so we were able to give them, the highest energy density cathode possible, and then you put that into the highest energy density cell possible, and then you get, the cell form factors. They have really thick electrodes. You can think of um, your cell has a current collector, which is just a sheet of aluminum foil on the cathode or copper foil on the anode, and that's kind of dead mass in the cell. So if you have a very thick active layer of the cathode and anode powder, then you have you need to have less foils because you
Hmm.
stack these foils up. You do anode, separator, cathode, separator, anodes, and this is the cell stack. So if you have less metal there, less mass that's not used, okay, then there's more active material mass. So you get really high energy density cells that way. But then if you throw in a really high energy density cathode, you get, you know heretofore unbroken energy density records. And so we were able to get more than 500 watt hours per kilogram, which comparatively 225, maybe up to like 250, 260 watt hours per kilogram is the current commercial cells that are out there and mass produced. So this is, more than double the energy density of these cells, and that's what we were able to get with 24M. And that's why they're 8 times better than 3M, right? That's how great of a company they are. So
Very good. Some quick math there. Um, just before getting a bit deeper into your NMA technology, going back to starting the business up just before COVID, you said, it's fairly low risk. You just had your daughter at the time, fairly low risk starting up the business, but surely, and you talk about it in a really exciting way and kind of joking around about the situation, but surely there was a time when you were quite concerned and a bit worried about what was going on.
oh, every day. That's what founding a business is. It's either exciting or uh, you can think of it in a negative way if you want to, and so stressful maybe. So we need to reframe it as exciting, right? That's part of the philosophy. But it's, in the end, when you have the grant, it's guaranteed some guaranteed income, right? And so then it de-risks it a lot, because if you start a company without any money behind it, then you've got to go try and hustle and find an investor that believes in it, and you don't know if that can happen. Sometimes conversations with investors can take uh, our when we did our Series A, it was 9 months of conversation before we got funded. And part of it is, if you know how to do it, it's, of course, if you've done it before, you know what you need to make an investor feel secure. But having been a scientist, uh, we don't. I didn't know how to do that, and it's tough even when you know how to do it.
Hmm.
So the grants make it much more, give you more of a safety net, right? You get your seed money right away, and then you can wait until you get that. You can form a company and then apply for grants, and then quit your day job once you get the grant issued. And so, and luckily, in being in Montiram's group, since he's very supportive of entrepreneurship, and he's a serial entrepreneur that's made a lot of companies, and so he knows, okay, this is the process, and I can help you so much, give you leeway. I think I only wrote like 3 papers in his group, the whole time, because I was writing a lot of grants for him. But so normally as a postdoc, they won't tolerate such low publication. But I was working on a lot of grant writing and whatnot. So it's good to have support, and then also, out of a university, you do get to, we were in this Texas venture mentoring service at the time, where they talk to you. Okay, how do you make a company? It's you got to. It's quite. There's a lot of little things that are actually, it's easy, but if you don't know what they are, you won't even know that this exists. That you got to, okay, you got to go get a cage code for a grant or whatever, and you got to get how do you do bookkeeping? Start off with Excel sheets and you just go crazy. So okay, just get QuickBooks. This will make it easy. And QuickBooks, I think, saved my life at some point.
Hmm.
So all these troublesome Excel sheets after Excel sheets that got out of control. And so for accounting rules, for how do you do a customer interview, and you got to ask what they basically. You do outreach, ping people on LinkedIn and try to get a conversation with them, and just ask them, do you care about this? Do you care about cobalt free? Do you care about uh, high energy cathodes? Do you want, what's the most important thing to you? And then you have to tune your product, towards what the customer wants, which is different than in academia, because you can get very focused on your technology. Say, oh, okay, we have this NMA cathode, and it already goes 1,000 cycles, so this is what we need to sell. So, and this is kind of how we were approaching it at first. We thought, okay, EVs, that's a huge market, right? That's what we want to hit, and so they need 1,000, 2,000 cycles. So this is what we needed to get our cathode up to. Well, actually, it's quite different for different applications, and the EV, which automotive OEMs, it's a great market, and we're going to hit that, and we can do the 1,000, 2,000 cycles that you need to hit this market. But there's a 3 to 5 year onboarding process for EVs, and they won't even really consider you until you have significant cathode production. So it's about scale up. You got to suddenly have hundreds of kilos. And when we started in Professor Manthiram's lab, we were doing tens of grams, 2 grams, even like a little tiny baby crucible that we were using, at first, high throughput kind of synthesis and things like this. And so, but realistically, you need, for a cell phone size battery, you need to get your customer 2 kilos of cathode material. So this was, part of the scale up that we did. And then, the next stage after that, okay, they need to see 10 kilos, 50 kilos, and they want to see that you can produce it at scale to match their needs. And so, this is part of it, that you learn about the onboarding process, and you've got to, as a small business, you've got to survive through that. If it's for EVs, you got to survive for up to 5 years while they onboard your material, right? They got to do all kinds of safety testing, process control. They do KYC. It's huge, and you have to provide gigawatt hours of equivalent, of cathode equivalent. And so it's very much it's a sort of, it's a goal market, but there are other smaller markets that you can hit first, and that are also niche markets where they pay premiums for it. So for like the defense market, for example, they pay 10x for their cells. So, okay, maybe they don't pay 10x for their cathode. We're trying to bump up that price, but it's a good market to go to, because there's less onboarding time. There's not really significant U.S. cathode production, so you're not competing against too many other cathode producers. And then they're focused, for now, they're building a bunch of cathode production for EV scale. It'll be kind of NMC or NCA type cathodes, and so they're already building towards that, but they're not focused on the smaller markets that we can hit. As a small, kind of scrappy startup that can kind of pivot to wherever we need to go.
Yeah.
And so that's what we found as well. And so we've started lining up customers that are in 10 megawatt hour, 5 megawatt hour, 50 megawatt hour, so smaller scale, but then we can charge a premium, and we can use it. It'll be quicker to market, and give us, help us survive to get to that gigawatt hour scale where we can, billions of dollars of cathode. It's a $30 billion market. By 2030 or so. So it's yeah, we'll hit that. But first, you gotta map out the steps.
Interesting. It's kind of the chicken and egg scenario. So what comes first? Producing a high number of cells or materials in this case, or get the orders first, and then start producing. So it's almost like you have to evidence it first before actually being able to win the business and win the orders. And as you say, that kind of survival and that funding is so key for that reason. So you mentioned EV is going to be really important. So are you pretty diverse then in terms of where you're feeding into market wise?
Yeah. I mean, of course, we're working with automotive OEMs and pushing that forward, it's a longer onboarding time. So then, we hit sort of niche markets, our defense and power tools and personal electronics, drones, things like this. And so there's a lot of, like I talked about 24M, where you have this new cell architecture. You can also have lithium metal anodes, silicon anodes, solid state stuff. As long as it works for NMC, NCA, then it works for NMA Cathodes. So we're dropping in that sense, and so we're trying to hit these markets and get those offtake agreements that can drive the next phase of production. And that's our that's our main goal this next 6 months or so. We're onboarding a 3-ton per annum pilot that'll help us get these 10 to 100 kilo type samples. Initial sales too. They want to. Every investor wants to see sales. That's the ultimate proof that you have a customer, right? And so make sure you charge some money for it. It's kind of symbolic, because in the end, at pilot scale, your the margins for labor are so much higher than the material that you can get back. But but it's important to develop the customer relationship in that way.
Very good. So let's say I'm a customer, not a difficult one, but if you're going to sell NMA to me in terms of the main benefits, so is it cost? Is it high power, kind of range? What is it that NMA can do for somebody's cell?
I mean, every customer is different. I think our first main offering is that we can do energy densities that other companies can't do. So the BASF and LG and Panasonic have giant production lines, and so they're set for a certain chemistry that is sort of lower in energy, but can be used in EV applications. And it's not new that can is going to cause any issues that the automotive companies will have to do an onboarding process. So we can hit capacities around 240 milliamp hours per gram, if that's what for a cell architecture where you take a lithium metal anode, you increase the energy density then of the cell significantly, but unless you can raise the anode almost to zero, but if you raise it to zero, you still have this giant bulky cathode that's there. And so we can shrink that cathode down by 20-30% even, and so we can hit those, increase then these energy densities far beyond if you would use a standard high nickel 811 type cathode material. And so we can give the energy densities that no one else can get, and we can tune it towards your application. So for instance, we had one customer that wanted low temperature applications, and so we surveyed a bunch of different NMAs and found the one that outperforms NCM and NCA commercial cathodes by 30%. And then we have a strategy. Okay, how do we increase that even further? And so this is what the customer wants for that specific application. And so you have these niches where what is your problem? Okay, we're the best cathode producers. We've got the technological background. We know how to tweak the cathode to your goals. So tell me what your problem is, and we'll work on it. We'll solve it for you. And that's what that's our main offering for niche. Then for long term NMA, you remove the cobalt. Cobalt's it's a huge problem for supply chain. It's mined primarily in Central Africa. There's allegations of slave labor and child labor and used with it, so there's plenty of ESG issues. Then it's expensive, and China controls more than 80% of the cobalt sulfate refinement. So there's a large supply chain risk with that. So if you care about supply chain, which of course all these automotive companies are worried about that, and if you care about cost, which obviously they do, you want to get rid of cobalt. And so this is what we can offer. So we have a lower bill of materials based on the exclusion of cobalt, and most of the cost of the cathode is in the transition metals. It's not in the production cost. It's already quite well optimized. So through removal of the cobalt, we can save up to 10% over competing technologies. And then also we have strategies too. We're working with automotive companies to even lower nickel, and have an even more affordable sort of for the more economic type EVs. And so that's right now first markets will be kind of high nickel will be competing against, and for the technology is NCM 811 and high nickel, NCA. And first we'll go after the defense market for that, then the premium EVs, and then subsequently as well, we're developing a product for kind of low cost, type material. So, and we can tune it to whatever the customer wants us to optimize. It's just we want to make the best cathode possible, and it doesn't need cobalt. That's what we can offer.
Nice. I'll place an order.
All right. Need a PO. I'll send
Yeah.
over.
To change the subject slightly, so a question I get asked a lot in the market is from people who've done a master's in chemical engineering and are contemplating whether or not to do a PhD. I can give this some advice in terms of the different pay scales, in terms of what someone would typically be paid as a battery or cell engineer and material scientist with or without a PhD, and things like this, and just from experience of dealing with people in the market. From your perspective, how much would you recommend doing a PhD? Is it essential? And do you think you could have founded TexPower and addressed the challenges as well as you have done without a PhD?
Yeah, for PhD, don't do it. It's bad for your mental health. It'll they tear you down and then rebuild you as no. That can be if you want to do a PhD, I think first it definitely helps for your career. I think that's if you have those three letters, it gets you in the door. They'll talk to you at first, and it's somewhat of it's a subjective thing, and if they talk to there are plenty of people that get PhDs, that are you just hang around long enough in academia, they'll give you a PhD. So and maybe that's what happened to me, but it does open doors. That is a convenient thing, and it helps for your career placement. I think if it can get you up a level, and if you're a manager or whatnot, if you have a PhD, they'll put you up versus a technician. Do you need one to start a company? Absolutely not. I come from academia, and TexPower started off kind of technology driven, and a lot of businesses are either you're technology driven, and the SBIR facilitates this a lot. And so learning how to commercialize something versus learning how to make something that works really, really well from a technological standpoint is very different questions. And then ultimately you want to know, what does the customer want? And so there are a different philosophy and it's kind of like a maze. If do you start the maze from the beginning, which maybe that's the technology, or do you start it from the end, which is actually the customer and sale? Well, if you start it from the end, it's of maze, it's actually easier. So you could start with find your customers, ask them what they want, and then you just make a product that fits what they want. That's the tried and true method of business, actually. And so if you are, and then you can pick whatever technology you need to do to make it work. And we found, with us, we started off with our assumptions about, okay, we need 2,000 cycles, we need most affordable cathode, and then we're going to go into the EV market. Well, that market is not so accessible, actually. It takes a long time to get there. And so you have to pivot. Okay, this is what here are the customers that can pay you right now. You need to make a product for them. And so then, okay, this is our high energy NMA, that we made. Okay, so that's the first market. If you started off just talking to customers and then developing a product for those customers, that's a different philosophy. And you could do that as an MBA. You could do that as just a business. You don't need any education to do that. You need to, you can go on LinkedIn, message someone, say, hey, I'm a student. I'm in business school. I'm trying to figure out, what does a customer need? What's your main pain points? And how can I help solve those? if you collect all this data and then you try to come up with a product, you can also do they call these technology transfer offices. You can go to a university, find a technical person that you think, oh, they know how to solve this. I know this is a problem that exists for the customer that's extremely important. Okay, they've got at UT Austin tons of patents that most of them are unused. They sort of let a professor write one patent, and if nobody pays for it, the university will pay for it, right? If nobody licenses it, then the university paid for it for no reason. So they have these patents that are sitting around. You can just go there, license a patent for almost nothing, and they'll give it to you for free for evaluation, really for a year or two.
Wow.
And you use this technology and try and solve the problem. And often you can work with that professor, write some grants, things like this. So you could start a business this way, and a lot of people do, and that may be the best way to do it, is because you're thinking you're solving the maze from the end, right? And so that's a different way. I mean, you need people that know how to do technology, right? You can't just show up and do uh, business stuff, and talk synergy and all that sort of Harvard Business School, Kanbans and that doesn't get you there either. So you need both, and you can learn business if you're a technology guy. You can learn technology if you're a business guy, or gal, and it just takes it's going to take challenges each way that you do it, and like I talked about the QuickBooks issue. You have no idea how stressful it was doing these Excel sheets, because I don't know how to do accounting at all, right? And then they have these federal accounting rules, and so you had to learn. You learn weird stuff, and it's every day is a surprise, and and so it's very exciting, but it can also be extremely stressful. And then building up a network is what you got to do, because there are so many people that have gone through this before, and they know how hard it is and how stressful it can be, and then they'll help you. And most cities have these sort of startup kind of accelerators or hubs. Here in Houston, there's the Ion, there's um, Greentown Labs, there's also the Canon. There's these facilities where you can go there. Just they have lectures from VCs and lectures from other companies that have gone through this, and then you have social hour where you just talk to people, say what's going on with you now, and like, oh, I did that before. It's such a pain, but here's what you do to make it easy, and that's part of it. And no matter what, you're not going to know what to do most of the time,
Mm.
and so you gotta learn how to do it. And I think that's the key for starting a business, and it just sticking around, like fighting through it when it gets rough. You gotta learn how to. All right, it's going to be a problem, but we'll figure it out.
It's all about being positive. Of course, in
Yeah,
your world, of course, very positive.
just like the cathode. It's the
Exactly.
most positive of electrodes.
Good stuff. Just a few more questions left. The first one being, how does the future look for TexPower?
Well, we're building our 150-ton production facility. We've got so this is the phase one, and so we're going after the niche applications. Building customer demand. We've got to raise some money for that. So reach out if you're a VC and wants to invest in the most expensive part of the battery. So it's a good market to be in and a difficult one to do. So there's not a lot of competition. You can make anode, schmanode, but cathode is more important, right? And no, it takes two to tango. But so we'll uh, make this phase one production facility, and after that, it'll be gigawatt hour scale that we're going after. So for EV applications and very large scale, maybe ESS as well, and um, different. The sky's the limit. At each stage, you have more options. It seems like so.
Nice.
So the
And
key is
that's
following customers.
and that's in Houston.
Yep.
The- so-
Well, I mean, production. The the phase one production will be here. We have a warehouse that's 27,500 square foot that we're building a 150 ton per year production in. And this is on Britmore. And if you guys are interested in reaching out, you guys are welcome to come for a visit and see the beautiful and beautiful Houston, which I must say to all potential employees that are recruited through Strativ, that Houston's a beautiful city with great food scene. The beach is just an hour away in Galveston. It's not cold here. So if you're from northern climates like then it's nice. It's sometimes almost a free sauna, which is important for heat shock proteins and things like that. And so it's a good place to go. So we're expanding our team, and so reach out for that. And yeah, it's growing fast. There's a huge they're dumping so much money too in from the grant side. You've got the bipartisan infrastructure law. You've got I think $7 billion for components, $5 billion for charging stations, $5 billion for electric buses and things like that. And then you got also the IRA, which is subsidizing U.S. production of these components, and so it's going to be an exciting decade, as we go forward.
Nice. Well, that was one of my other questions, was how what would investment mean to you? But you've just answered that, which is great. So the final question from my side is, what is the best piece of advice for founders or CEOs that are starting up in the battery space?
Yeah, I think focus on the customer first, and just keep it focused. You can, if you get stuck in one direction trying to solve it, you can work on something that's not actually the main goal. So you find your main goals, go towards those, and ruthlessly execute towards those goals. Don't try to go off on side missions. It's not worth it. You've got to get, when you're a startup, it's a race. So you got to get as quickly as possible to that end goal, and just stick through it. It's going to get bad sometimes, and you gotta, but get a good night's sleep, and it'll be better in the morning.
Nice. No, good stuff. Well, that was really good, really useful. I'm not a chemical engineer by trade, but you kind of put that in layman's terms, and I understood that was really interesting. And I'm sure for our listeners that would be really, really interesting. The solution is evident. It sounds really exciting, and you've got really good plans in place. So good luck. I'm all about sustainability and recycling, especially jokes. So I'm going to finish this off by saying, stay positive.
Yeah, stay positive.
Good stuff. And is there anywhere that you'd want to point listeners to find out more about TexPower?
We're on LinkedIn, also TexPowerEV.com. TexPower.com was too expensive, so we just got the TexPowerEV.com. EV as an electric vehicle, and also same as on LinkedIn. So our full company name is TexPower EV Technologies Inc. And so that you can look for us there. I'm on LinkedIn. You can message me. So yeah.
Nice one. Good stuff. Well, thank you again, Evan. Thanks for coming on, and yeah, stay positive. Take care.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.